Hello all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 2, and today we are on Episode 8, titled Bolognese. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check out the episode before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Episode 8.
I am again going to call an audible and use the Hulu summary because it's shorter. All of the Hulu ones are way shorter, which just is so much more on brand for The Bear. So the Hulu summary is: the crew awaits a do or die fire suppression test.
Yes. The anticipation has been building over the last couple of episodes as they have failed it. Was it two times?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. This is their last try before they literally will go or not go. It's go, no go decision. Okay. Let's kick off with our episode titles of choice for Episode 8. What is yours?
Mine is 106 Miles to Chicago.
Yes. Nice. Yes. My episode title is Suit Up.
Yes, Richie is suited up in this episode. Ready to go.
Dude, yes. He's so proud of it too. You know, I just love that every person that he interacts with. Yeah, I'm wearing suits from now on. Like, okay, thank you for announcing this. They're also all just like royally shocked. Oh, Richie, where are you going? Do you have something?
Yeah. Did you just come from a funeral?
A funeral for my enemies. Okay, let's dive in and start off with our overview of thoughts about Episode 8. What are your thoughts about this episode?
I think that this is one of those episodes that's just a culmination of so many other things that the show has been doing over the season. You know, so we had that episode with Richie where he went through all these changes and like finally gets it, and then we see the payoff for that here. We've seen, you know, Tina going to culinary school, and now we see her actually leading. Ibra went away for a bit. He's back in this episode. So this is, yes, Ibra's back. So this is just one of those episodes where so many things have been seeded throughout all of these other episodes, particularly when characters have been apart from each other. And now everybody has come back together, and we get to see them in their new positions, with their new frame of mind, with their new outlook, whatever that may be, and get to see how they are working together. And I don't know, it's heartwarming to be back with this crew again. So I had a great time seeing everybody back at the restaurant, ready to go as they are trying to pass this fire suppression test.
Yeah, this is a feel-good episode, I would say. There just feels like this progress in all of the directions that we have been running in. And there's so many moments of growth that we get to see between pairs and of our characters. And we'll talk about some of those. I think the most notable are Carmi and Sydney, some of their healthy conflict management that they are now learning and executing on together. And then with Richie and Natalie, I think there's a really sweet moment between them too. So this two, I think, really stand out to me. And then also, obviously, we passed our fire suppression test, so we can actually open this restaurant that we've been working so hard with this team on. So this just felt like growth for every character in the ways that they have been wrestling and struggling and dealing with all of their things over the past couple of episodes. And now there's just like each character's taking steps forward. Ibra's back. He's back in the crew. There's a really great moment between him and Tina as well. So I just feel like this episode is such a feel-good episode. And this is maybe getting a little bit ahead, but my looking ahead is like, what's going to go wrong now? Because we've got 2 more episodes left, and inevitably the compression of stress and time will lead to something. But for right now, we're making steps forward, and it feels so good. Both, like at a logistical level with opening the restaurant, but then also like for each of these characters, we are making progress forward.
And I love how this show really balances tension and that progress too. Because before the fire suppression test, Sugar meets with Uncle Jimmy in the car, and he talks about
Mm.
how they have to pass this test because if they don't open in 10 days, they are screwed. And so I love that this show is so intentional in setting the stakes and creating that tension because we already know that the whole crew is tense about the fire suppression test because they've already failed twice. And then you see Fac not sure how to fix everything. Then you see the tension and the stress from Carmi and Sydney as they're butting heads, and you know that this test is kind of looming over that. And then you have that conversation with Uncle Jimmy. And I love that even though we've seen so much progress, the show is continuing to create those stakes and continuing to create those sources of tension all throughout. And then when they finally do pass, it's so rewarding and you feel so relieved because you know how much that meant to this crew. And it's this really, really big hurdle that they had to leap over. Of course, they have other hurdles too, but that was the big one that they just have not been able to clear for so many episodes. And now they've finally done it. So we feel that sense of joy and victory, and we can celebrate with the team as well.
Hmm. The way that fire suppression test scene is shot is so interesting as well. It just the way that we're panning. Well, first of all, the show loves clocks, so we've got the countdown going, which is just anxiety inducing in and of itself. It's cutting back and forth between the seconds that they're counting and then this little tiny balloon connected to this pipe. Like it just, that in and of itself, I thought was cut together really great. But it's also then intercut by this third piece, which is this like slow pan over each of our characters that we've grown to love and feel invested in. And there's these kind of like glimmers, these quick shots of everything that's happening in their personal lives, the ways that they are invested in making this awesome. And I think that moment, that scene comes after a scene earlier when Sweeps says in the room with Richie and Natalie, like, we all need this to be great. We need this to work together. And I just thought that that was such a great way to get us obviously invested in the fire suppression test, of course, and just the like logistical piece that plays into their success. But the show then still continues to ground us and know these are people that have invested their time and their lives, and they've got all these things in their personal lives that make them who they are, but also they are invested in this so personally. And just the way that was shot, I thought was so smart to do, because the show knows we're already invested in this fire suppression test being successful, but to continuously ground it back in who these people are that are also invested in this, I think just was such a smart choice. And I think it's indicative of the way that the show is so character grounded and character anchored. And even this fire suppression test scene is an example of that.
Yeah, this whole season in particular, they are focusing so heavily on the characters, and I really love it. That moment with the fire suppression test made me think of the episode earlier in the season where we're just focused on Sydney as she's eating her way through Chicago, and as she is coming up with that recipe and she's having these ideas, we see flashes of her
Mm.
past, and you can see how like deeply personal these dishes are to her. And this episode, it's not just her that this restaurant is deeply personal for, but for every one of these people. They are so invested in this. Blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a brilliant way to depict that visually for us without having to say anything.
Yeah, and it's cool because the show has put so much time into building those foundations and understanding for us as the viewers to know who these characters are, that those set of 2-3 shots that honestly like flash across the screen. Like we know exactly what they're referencing. We know the emotional stakes of those situations, moments that the flashbacks are cutting to. And I think it's a testament to the way that the show's already built that foundation, that we don't need any more than that. Just a shot of Marcus in the hospital room with his mother. Like we know and we feel every bit of that, you know? And so just it's kind of like the emotional investment the show has put into bank already, they're now getting to reap the benefits of. They don't even need to give us more because they know they've got us. We're already there. We're already invested. Just these little tiny glimmers is more than enough to get us to be like, yeah, man, this like we really need this to work.
And it does.
And it does.
Yes.
Yes.
Good job, the bear. They did it. They're a
Mm-hmm.
restaurant now.
Yes. And I love that Fak got to play like such a key role in this as well. I feel like
Mhm.
he's often been the side character that comes in to help and fix a thing here and there. But no, like his role and his unique skill sets are literally the piece of the puzzle that is necessary for everything else to work. And so I feel like it's easy to view him and his role and whatnot as kind of this like side character, but I love that he gets his like hero moment where he played like honestly one of the biggest roles in the success of the restaurant, beyond the menu, beyond the front of the house, beyond all of that kind of stuff. Like we need all of that like behind the scenes stuff that maybe isn't seen or as flashy. Like no, those are just as vital to this running successfully.
Yeah, it was great to see Thack have that hero moment, and I love seeing his interactions with different people throughout this episode too, because I feel like we usually get like happy, smiley, silly Thack in most episodes, but in this one, he's very different, and you can tell how stressed he is in this episode because while he is still like joking and funny, there's still a seriousness about him. Like there's that one shot where he's just standing with his face facing a wall, and that's him just hiding out because he is stressed and doesn't know what to do about this fire suppression test. And so it's these little moments where we see a different side of Thack, and he is also very invested in this, and he wants this restaurant to work too, and he feels the weight of this being all on him to figure it out. And so it's subtle, but I love that we get to see that different dimension of Fak in this episode. So he's not just one thing, he's just as complex as all of these other characters.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And it's funny too when he discovers what his like he thinks the solution is and he goes and tells Carmi and he literally looks
Yeah.
deranged. Like homeboy's got
Yeah.
crazy eyes. Because you can tell, like you mentioned, it's been like hours and days and weeks of obsessing and poring over this puzzle that cannot be solved. And so he's kind of gotten like sucked into it because he knows this is so important. And so the thought of a potential fix just homeboy's got crazy eyes.
Mm-hmm. But he did it. He did it.
Yeah.
Um, so another big victory in this episode, I guess you could call it, is your guy, Richie.
Yes.
We get a whole new Richie in this episode.
It is so endearing. He is parading around in his like fancy new suit and there's a really like sweet little moment that he says early on where he's like it makes me feel good about myself and you're like oh yes you've taken all of the things this new confidence that he's been just like blossomed into from the previous episode. I love that that through line is still continuing. The attention to detail that we get to see from him and his kind of clever little ways to interview candidates and turn the napkin slightly and see how much it bugs them and understanding like what types of skill sets he's looking for and how to test for those in kind of really creative and unconventional ways. Like I just feel like we're seeing Richie really blossom fully. And I think one of the things we were talking about at the end of last episode is like, how is the group going to receive this new changed evolved Richie and this new confidence that he has, and they fully embrace him and they are so excited for him. They're like I love the moment with him and Tina as well, where Tina's I think always been in his corner and they have such a sweet relationship, but you just see the way that they're like, all right, like cool, Richie, let's see this new version of you. And they just totally don't even bat an eye and are just excited for him. So I love how much this family really has embraced the change that he has made, and in such a stressful situation and timeline, like tensions are high. It could have easily been discouraging for him had his community not fully accepted his evolution, and they don't. They're encouraging for him. They are celebrating all of the new ways that he is growing, and it's really neat to see him operating in his newfound superpowers. So I thought that was really great. And then we should obviously talk about the whole scene with him and Natalie, which I think is also kind of the pinnacle of this new growth that Richie's had. So tell me your thoughts about that scene.
Yeah, I loved that scene because we've seen throughout this season that tension between Richie and Natalie, and her struggling to know what to do with him wanting to take control away from her. Like, this has been a contentious relationship the whole season. And I love that the film, or not the film, this isn't a film, this is an episode. The episode kind of opens with him going to Natalie. And that's one of the first conversations that he has. And she is apprehensive at first. Like, she makes a joke out of it. She calls Gary in to like
Love
witness the
that.
apology. So it's a really funny moment. But I love that Richie is so he sticks to his guns, and he knows that he needs to apologize, and he
Mhm.
knows that he needs to say what he needs to say. So he's not even going to be deterred by those jokes. He's not going to be deterred by Gary's presence when he probably wasn't planning to have an audience for the apology. And so I think that that says so much about who Richie is becoming and how far he is on this journey and how committed he is to this journey. And then, of course, it ends with Natalie and Richie hugging, and her extending that olive branch of like, hey, interview front of house with me. And then during that interview, she is able to see like, oh, okay, he's bringing a lot to the table. And so I like that she didn't immediately trust him. She didn't immediately let him into everything, but she is slowly easing her way into that, and then he is proving that he can handle those things. So I'm really excited to see how that relationship continues to be strengthened, and how these two can kind of balance each other out and be good partners for all of this stuff not happening in the kitchen.
Yes, and I love, like you mentioned, that she acknowledges that it's going to take time, and she says that to him pretty clearly and explicitly as well, which I think is really healthy, because that baby step forward for them is huge, and it's the series of steps forward that will get them to that place of building trust and building that collaboration and that connection again, and that can't happen overnight. And so just the emotional awareness that Sugar has to communicate that clearly with Richie as well, so that there's not a gap in expectation of, okay, now we're all good and we're back to normal and everything's fully redeemed. No, it does take time, and she sets that expectation with him, but she also is creating opportunity for them to take that step forward. And so I thought that just the whole conversation was so healthy, so healthy, because sometimes you see apologies and you're like, this was either like too rosy, where it's like it's very optimistically like, okay, we're back, everything, the relationship's fully healed, or you see apologies that are like pretty lackluster. And I think Richie does a great job recognizing and communicating, like, hey, I was operating out of this feeling of insecurity, it manifested like this, I recognize that that was really frustrating and hard for you, I was shitty in this way, but I want to do better. Tell me how we can take a step forward. And I love that he asks for that too, of just saying, like, what you need, tell me what that could be, and I will try and fit in and try and help you as much as I can. So him kind of allowing her the space to like think and recognize what she needs and putting her first in that way was also just really beautiful. So just such healthy human dynamics in that whole scene. I thought that was really, really great.
And I love that he acknowledges that she's really good at some things. Because I feel like this whole season, he has kind of been undermining her the whole time. And so then for him to not only acknowledge like where he's coming from, but also to go, you're really good at a bunch of stuff that I don't know how to do. And to have that humility to admit that when he's been just this really like prideful dude full of bravado that's really just motivated by insecurity. But to see that humility from him, I think was really, really nice to see, and just a satisfying uh, step from the previous episode where he goes through this whole transformation and begins to see how a team could function. So I think you're right in describing this as a feel good episode, because that relationship in particular will just give you all the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, yeah. And you're so right that there's this really interesting combination happening for Richie right now where he's discovering his superpowers and his skill sets, but it's not fueling his sense of pride. In fact, it's fueling this really beautiful humility where he's like, this is the role that I am now excited and stepping into and feel confident that I'm able to contribute to this team. And here's where I can yield. And the combination of those two things together is really satisfying because there's another version of this where Richie discovers he's really great at this thing, Carmi's encouraging it, and his ego gets blown up and he continues to operate from that place of lack and trying to prove himself now, overwork himself, go to the end of the earth to try and prove his newfound ability or this role that he can play. But there's this really fascinating combination of this newfound confidence he's stepping into and yet this humility that is also rising at the same time as the confidence is rising in these other areas, and his ability to yield and the things that he knows, like, hey, I'm not good at that, but I'm really good at this other thing and I can contribute here. But this thing, like, you're the expert and I can't wait to see how we can fit together. I think he also articulates that clearly to Sugar. He's like, I think we could fit really well together. And it was just really sweet to see him, just explicitly express that to her in this scene. Oh, so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Have I especially the first time watching the show, I was super skeptical of Richie, but it was the previous episode and then this episode that really made me like, okay, I understand. I feel like I went on like the same journey as Sugar my first time watching this, where for so long I was like, I don't understand your place here. You're not a good teammate. What are we doing? You're just an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
But now it's nice to see him like being a really good teammate and showing that he can function within this team and function well instead of just being an agent of chaos, which I feel like he was for a season and a half. So I'm very excited for new Richie who knows how to
Mm.
play well with others. This is very exciting.
Yes, yes. And I just love that he's able to articulate and be honest with himself and therefore able to be honest with Sugar around like him operating out of lack, him operating out of insecurity before, and therefore that's why he's lashing out in these ways, trying to fit himself in places that he just doesn't fit. And just the honesty and the amount of like self-awareness and self-reflection that I'm sure he must have needed to do to get to that point where he can admit that to himself and then voice that out loud to this person that he's constantly been in contention with, and being willing to just say like, this is my truth, and it was not good, but like that humility to also see himself clearly is really admirable because it's hard to do. It's hard to be honest with ourselves about the areas where we're insecure and operating out of lack. But Richie has been able to do that and therefore been able to articulate and build that connection and build that trust now with Sugar. So props to him too, because he's kind of been this really impulsive person, but he's got this really interesting like reflective side that's we're seeing manifest itself in really fun ways.
So there's another character in this episode who had been dealing with some insecurity, comes, makes some steps to repair some relationships.
Yes.
Our
Ibra's
guy
back.
Ibra,
Oh
he's
my gosh.
back.
I think I literally like gasped and then was proceeded to like grin like a mad woman when Ibra was on screen. Because the other thing is we've gotten like little snippets of Ibra, but they're often just like a few seconds of a shot and then we're on to the next. But like we get to really see Ibra in this episode. And there's this really wonderful scene with him and Tina. What I love, I mean, there's a really great, I mean, obviously, like reconciliation and him admitting his fears and his insecurities and why he like ran, and then now he's back. But I just one thing that I love is that they have that conversation in the only way that Ibra and Tina would, which is like they're not really
Mhm.
talking about themselves, but they both know what we're talking about. So they're referencing like old bitches and bad motherfuckers, and I love that that is their way of communicating. It's so high context, yet it feels so perfect for those two characters and the rapport that they've built. And they both are clearly aware of what they're discussing, and it's just really sweet to see the way that they both understand each other so much to know that that is how they need to have this conversation, because it's hard to talk about it so explicitly, and like that doesn't feel right for these two characters either. So that was my favorite part about that whole conversation too.
And I love that it's so sweet and so endearing, and yet it's so spicy at the same time. And it's just this perfect blend that both of these characters have within them. Because I feel like they're both like nurturing in their own ways, and yet they can both call people out in their own ways.
Mhm.
And they're both very different, but they both have that in them. And so that conversation is just so fun and dynamic just because of who these two characters are and their personalities and everything they bring to the table. Um, but my favorite thing about Ibra coming back is that we don't see really anybody else like having a conversation with Ibra about him suddenly being back. You know, it's
Mm.
just like Ibra comes back and he just fits right back into the team as if nothing ever happened. And I like to believe that that is what happened, that he just came
Mm.
back and everybody was happy to see him and he just fell right back in, and there wasn't any weirdness or that awkwardness. Like he didn't have to explain himself or do any of the things. Like he was just back and accepted into this team. And I love that thought that this group, they really are like a family in that
Mhm.
even if you leave, you're still welcome back and they still love you and accept you and you can belong here. And I think
Mhm.
especially we don't know really what was going on with Ibra, but he was dealing with a lot of insecurity and doubt and all of
Yeah.
those things. So I think that that sense of belonging and acceptance is super valuable, especially when you've been dealing with those types of things.
Yes. No, that's so true. That's so true. And I love the way that when Ibra's expressing like, hey, it's because I was fearing change, I was getting scared. I love that Tina's response to him isn't like, well, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you do the hard thing. No, she actually says that's why they surround themselves with bad mofos who push their ass. And I think the emphasis on community and family is so huge throughout this entire show. The recognition that like we need each other. We can't go it alone. It's in community that we find our superpowers, that they are plugging in unique ways, that we are in relationship with each other to be better together and run the race together. And I love that that's what she says to him when he says he fears these things and got scared and whatnot. It's not, you just got to push through. No, the answer is you need people that will come alongside you and honestly pick you up when maybe you don't even have the strength to yourself, or speak life into you over you and encourage you when you might not be able to find that in and of yourself. And so the emphasis on community and family and relationships and surrounding yourself with good people, I feel like is such a huge theme throughout the show. And I love that Tina is able to communicate that in this scene and really drive that point home. It was really great.
Oh, it's so good. And we also know now that when Ibra is stressed and dealing with big feelings and stuff like that, that he
Yeah.
will isolate.
Yep.
And so that'll just be something to look forward to in the coming episode or the coming seasons about when Ibra gets stressed, how does he respond? Does he take to heart those lessons and understand that belonging and that acceptance and relying on the team, or does he fall back into old ways? So
Hmm.
I like that this episode is, you know, so much redemption and feel goodness, but it also gives us things to look for with this character of, okay, is he going to continue to grow, or is he going to slide back into unhealthy habits? And we don't know. We're just going to have to
Hmm.
see how things pan out.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And what's also cool in his response to his fears is the way that Ibra and Richie are these like really interesting foils with each other because they both articulate the very similar fear around change and what their place is when things around them change, or they also sense maybe there's change in themselves that is being they're called into that maybe they're like shying away from. And uh Richie, his response is like fight or flight response is basically to fight. Like he's fighting everyone constantly and rubbing up against everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
that's his way of responding and kind of expressing those fears around change. And it's neat to see the foil of that, which is Eber's response is to isolate and to run. So his fight or flight response is flight, like let's get out of here and disengage from community, versus Richie's like, let's drive everybody nuts and push all their buttons because we don't know what to do with our big feelings. So those two are really fascinating foils, and because they share and have expressed similar fears, I think we can really see the ways that their responses are different as well, and also the ways that they are growing as well. So that was really cool to see.
Oh, we love to see it.
Yeah.
We love these characters and we just want good things
Yes.
for them. And
Me
this is one of
too.
those episodes where good things are happening.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice.
It's so true. It's so true. And what's cool is that like when there is this spectrum of responses in our characters that we see, we as the viewers can relate to them. Maybe some people relate like very much to Richie. I relate to Ibra, where my response is also like, "Let me isolate, let me disengage, let me run," and so the way that the show is offering the very like spectrum of human responses allows us to be like, I see myself in this character, I see other aspects of myself in this character, and the emotional investment we have in them is really tied to some of those ways that we connect with them because we see ourselves and just it personally resonates. So the way the show is not offering just like one way of people dealing with hard things, but this spectrum of ways is really cool as well.
Yeah, yeah. These characters are all so complex and they feel so human. And that's what makes this show so good. You know, obviously the all of the technical components are great and the story is great and the dialogue is great and all of that, but it is so rooted and grounded in these characters who, like you said, you can see yourself in. I am also more of an Ibra. Um, but you just want to root for them. Everybody has something endearing in them, even Richie. Uh, and they all have strengths and weaknesses, and they're all working through their stuff in different ways. And I don't know, you just want to cheer them on. You want to root for them, not just for the restaurant to succeed, though that would be good, but you want to root for them as people to overcome whatever obstacles they're dealing with or whatever things they're wrestling within themselves. And I don't know, I think it's really special that this show has been able to create such a large cast where you want to root for every single person. Like I feel like a lot of shows
Yeah.
there'll be like a handful of them that you're like, yeah, I'm rooting for you, but these other ones you either don't care about or you actively don't like. But this show has a large cast of characters and you want to root for all of them. Even when Richie was driving me crazy and I didn't understand why he was on this team, I wanted better for him and I wanted him
Mm.
to do better. And so I think that is what makes this show so special is every character you want to root for, and that doesn't always happen.
No, that's so true. And I think a lot of times the structure of shows is you have a primary protagonist, or perhaps a few of them. There's some mission or journey that they're going on, and so many of the like side characters are just, there's less time to develop them, and so you're really invested in your primary few protagonists to follow. And in The Bear, what they do really well is that actually, like, the colliding of all these characters together brings out them all in really special ways, and each character becomes more dimensional as they interact with other characters and go through other situations. And so it's, I think it's a harder task to do, but also it's able to be really efficient and cover a lot of ground, because throw a couple characters together and you actually learn about all three of them in the situation, right? Instead of there's one that we're following and the other characters are there to kind of like reflect or draw out different sides of this one character. No, actually, all of these characters are being grown and developed and evolving all together as they collide with each other, encourage each other, fight with each other. Like, it all is showing us who these people that are fully realized are who they really are.
So, some other important characters that we
Mm-hmm.
have not talked about yet that we probably should talk about
Mm-hmm.
are Carmi and Sydney. They have a little
Yeah.
bit of a moment, seem to resolve it. How are we doing, these restaurant partners?
This is the scene that stood out to me the most in the episode, because one, I think we've followed these two characters so closely over the past two seasons, but two, there's been so much tension between the two of them for the course of the season, and they have blown up each other a million times beforehand. So to see them have these new skill sets and this new trust built that they can together diffuse a potential blow up is like really incredible to see. Like, just the way that they're walking out how to be in healthier communication with each other and healthy conflict management is like amazing. However, I do think that there's still a lot brimming beneath the surface between them. Like, they diffuse this moment, but there's, Sydney raises her concern with Claire being so involved or having such a voice in forming the menu, and kind of expressing that she feels some type of way about it, but they don't really get to tease that out yet. Maybe they're both not ready yet, or maybe they just didn't have the time to, or maybe they both are not ready to, like, really talk through that. But I feel like we are growing and making healthier steps in the right direction, but there's still, I think, going to be a lot more between the two of them that we're going to see play out, I think, in the next two episodes. Because while they have these better skill sets, there's also just the like really digging into the root of some of these things, and finding reconciliation or being in alignment with each other that they still aren't totally there yet. So I kind of feel like mixed about it. I'm like, oh yes, like, good job, you did a really great job with this moment, but there's still a lot there in general that I feel like we have not touched on yet or acknowledged yet. So what were your thoughts about Carmi and Sydney as business partners in that scene?
I need Carmi to do better. Like, come on, buddy, get it together. I'm way more on Sydney's side of the fence on this one than I am on Carmi's side of the fence.
Mm,
Uh, just because Carmi is not a great communicator, and we already knew this, but it's in little things like he didn't tell Sydney that he's changing a dish and they don't need a certain ingredients when she's already figured out the vendor and the, how to purchase it and all of that. Like, it's not just like, oh, I had this creative idea and we're going to do this other thing, but it affects so much of the business, this one little decision not to use that ingredient in this one dish. And so I'm like, Carmi, I need you to do better with your communication. Like, you are not isolated in a little bubble, and you
mhm.
making these decisions affects the entire business. And so I think for me, like, this is another episode where I just want to shake Carmi and, like, I need you to have a little bit wider perspective on what's going on. And we've already talked about a couple episodes ago how Carmi can get such tunnel vision, which is great in some contexts. But I think running a restaurant is probably not one of those contexts. You know, you need to have a bigger view of what's going on and how the business works. So even in that conversation, like, yes, I'm happy that they were able to resolve it, but like, there's a lot more here. And the issue isn't Claire, the issue is
Yep.
communication and him not understanding that he needs to tell Sydney these things because it affects everything. And so that is a much bigger issue, like you were talking about. And of course, communication is so important. And I'm sure we're going to see that pop up as they get closer to this restaurant and as the pressure continues to climb about them opening and having to decide the menu and all of these things. So under stress, communication is really put to the test, and we'll see how these two do when things heat up. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. And I think what's also just interesting in this episode is that uh, we see in general it's partially communication, but it's also Carmi's kind of uh, opportunity for emotional growth and kind of intuitiveness as well, and kind of the emotional maturity that he's still kind of walking out and figuring out. And honestly, he's like suppressed and numbed so many of his emotions for so long that he's really just figuring out how to like manage them, understand them, and then how it relates and how he can detect them in other people as well. But the scene with Carmi and Sydney and the kind of the bigger problems that they have also is in line with his inability to kind of understand the like relational dynamics with Claire as well, and the lack of clarity that he's not creating in that relationship as well. And so I think it's cool to see how like in his work life and in his personal life, that underlying opportunity for growth to be aware of the ways that other people might be feeling and empathizing and understanding them, putting yourself in the other shoes to then inform how you might need to communicate is also an interesting, uh, pairing of things together in this episode, because I think it is one of the other thread lines through this episode is Carmi being like, oh, I didn't know I needed to like define the relationship and create clarity for Claire on like what we are, and he just it's like revelatory for him. He's like, oh, I needed to do that. Like I thought we just could hang out, and I think you see the same thing in his conversation with Sydney. He's kind of unable to like empathize with the other side fully yet, so therefore his communication is a little bit off, and kind of his actions might not reflect what's best for the other to create clarity, understanding, hear them, and then kind of operate and know how to act from there. So had he thought for just a couple of minutes or seconds of, hey, Sydney might be feeling like she's not understanding how some of these decisions are being made, and there's this other party that's coming in, this might be difficult or frustrating for Sydney. Maybe he could just, hold space for her, or understand or communicate or express that understanding, and then change his behavior accordingly. But his inability to kind of see beyond his own point of view, I think is also a challenge that is manifesting in both professionally and then also in his personal romantic relationship as well.
No, that's a really good point, because the stuff with Claire and Sydney just constantly going, a girl that's your friend. It's not just there for humor, but they
Yeah.
are related to each other, and it's showing that these things that Carmi is experiencing, or these tendencies that Carmi has, are affecting him in all areas of his life, but he probably didn't realize that before, just because of the the way that his life was going, like when he's just a chef and doesn't really have a lot of interpersonal relationships, he doesn't have to deal with this stuff. But now that he has a business partner, now that he has a girlfriend, now that he's leading this restaurant, you know, his relationship with Natalie is growing stronger. All of this is really forcing some of these things to light that he didn't have to deal with when he wasn't in this situation. So it's so interesting how this show is able to use these two very different situations to kind of squeeze this out of Carmy and let us know some of the things that he is dealing with internally, and giving him, you know, a choice, a path to growth, or the opportunity to continue to operate in some of these kind of dysfunctional areas. So again, we're going to see, what does Carmy do, and how does he grow, or how does he cling to old patterns? We don't know. We got 2 more episodes. We'll
We
see what happens.
do. Yes. Yes, indeed. Okay. Any other thoughts about this episode before we give out some awards? Did we hit them all?
I don't think so. I think we got everybody. Marcus is back too, killing
Yes.
it with desserts.
Mm-hmm.
Which is great. There was one thing that he was making. I don't even know what it was, but it was this like big, like doughy thing. It looked so good. I was like, Marcus, I don't know what you just baked, but I want that right now. Can I have that? So it's great to see Marcus absolutely killing it in the dessert game.
Mm-hmm. And cool to see too the way that like both Sydney and Carmy, I think they both try something that he creates, and they are
Mm-hmm.
so just like, wow, and it just feels like such a like redemption for them, kind of at the end of season 1 trying his donuts and having that same reaction, but they all three of them are now in much healthier states, and it's a much more calm, like, let me try what you've created instead of eating your donut off of the floor because everything went to shit, you know, like there's just that echoing is gonna kind of cool, to see the way that's evolved.
Yeah, I think the only other shout out that I would like to give is how clean the office is now that it's Sugar's office. It looks great. It's pristine. She has a little chair in there so somebody can sit if they want. We don't have an insane filing system anymore. So it's just really great when Richie goes into the office to apologize. I was like, oh my gosh, it is a clean office. This is incredible.
Yes,
So
that's
again,
very good point.
shout out to the production design people to make
Hmm.
sure that that change was made, to show us just how far this restaurant has come, and that Sugar was able to create this space that is calm and clean and orderly.
That's a fabulous point. I forgot that it was truly a state of chaos beforehand, with things like falling out of the shelves above, and there's like things tacked on everywhere. Yes, very true. Okay, let's give out some awards. So the first category is Top Chef. Who is getting this award?
I want to give it to FAC for figuring out how to fix the fire suppression system.
Yep, that was my award too.
Yes. So good.
Yes. I mean, he's the MVP, honestly. This restaurant would not exist without him. I love it. He gets his little moment.
Mm-hmm. He
Very
does.
sweet.
He does.
The next category is Achievement in Chaos. Who is getting this award for, or for what moment?
I would like to give this to the shared bottle of off-brand Pepto-Bismol that the team shares.
We are just on the same wavelength today, because mine was
Whoa!
for Carmine Fact drinking Pepto in the closet as they are hiding from everyone.
That's amazing.
Wow.
The other like little component of that I really appreciated in this episode is at the beginning when Carmy and is talking to Claire in his apartment, there's a whole bottle of Tums sitting on top of his microwave. And so you just know that he has various antacids just stashed
So
everywhere. Like there always needs to be one within reach for
I'm
him
like,
in this season.
I
And so
I
I
did a
love that.
double take. I was like, is that, I thought it was maybe, one of those like naked smoothies, that because it has the same like thickness, viscosity of just like, brightly colored thick liquid. I'm like, surely
Mhm.
this is not what I think it is. And then Fat
Nope.
comes in and he hands it to him. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I have so many questions for you too.
Mhm. I also love that it's a generic brand too. Like
Yes.
it's not actual Pepto-Bismol. And so it makes so much sense for the characters too that they're
Yep.
gonna buy the off-brand. Hey, which is no shame because I will almost always buy off-brand stuff. But I love that detail too, that they didn't use the actual Pepto-Bismol, but they used the off-brand of whatever store.
Feels right. Feels like the choice that
Mhm.
Carmen would make at the grocery store of like,
Yes,
okay, whatever, this one's fine.
absolutely.
Okay, the next category is spiciest line. What is your
Here,
choice?
okay, are we gonna go 3 for 3?
That's what my
Because
question
when I
is.
was picking this line, I was like, man, is Jen gonna pick this same line?
Oh, okay. Grand
I picked
reveal.
grand reveal. I want to give this to Tina for when she says to Ibra, not open yet, ma'am.
I love that movie. Yes. We are not 3 for 3, which is great.
Nice. Okay.
It's funny. But that is a fabulous moment. And and it's like in a fun way, just her way of being like, all right, you're back. Like the rapport is still there. We still homies. But I'm gonna be a little mad for a second, you know?
Mhm.
Um, it's just really sweet, the rapport. I love that moment. My choice is, so this is in the Sydney and Carmi scene, and Carmi's like, I don't want to be an asshole. And then Sid goes, then don't be.
Yeah.
And I just love it because it is so Sid. Just this is how she communicates, and her rapport and dynamic with Carmi. It's so matter of fact. It's so like, okay, then don't. You're clearly aware of it.
Mhm.
You can do it, Carmi. You can do it.
And then I love Carmi's reaction of like, oh, okay, so then I just won't be one, that like he sends the sass right
Yeah,
back to
right
her.
back.
And it's really funny.
Oh, it's so great. Okay, looking ahead, what are you excited for as we have 2 more episodes left? A lot can happen in
Well,
2 episodes,
we
honestly.
a lot can happen in 2 episodes. So we are days away from
Yeah.
the restaurant opening. And we also have a friends and family event. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that could go wrong.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we've already gotten glimpses into some of the family members. And so it's just exciting to imagine what a friends and family event
Oh,
at the
man.
Bear could look like. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens as we continue to progress and barrel our way towards an opening.
Yep. Yep. uh, for anyone that's done like launches, event plannings, product launches, you know that the last 3, 4 days beforehand are absolute. It's every little thing that can go wrong will go wrong, and everything you thought you accounted for, there's like 10 more things that you didn't account for. So this will be interesting. Tensions and stress will be high. I My biggest thing on my list is I just feel like this episode was such a feel good and such a victory in every possible way for all of our characters and their relationships and their personal growth that I'm like bracing myself for what is about to ensue. And the bear from season 1 did like a really dramatic penultimate episode. So I have faith that they are going to deliver on something going very wrong, and our characters will be pressed and tested in new ways for them to be able to showcase all of their new growth. So I think that'll be really fun and interesting. And then I don't know. I just have this could be totally off, but I just have a spidey sense that there's like more in Marcus's storyline. Um, Again, I keep going back to, we opened this whole season with him, and he wasn't in this episode as prominently, but I just wonder if they'll do more with his character and his story arc. I don't know. So I just have Marcus question mark on my notes here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we'll
Yep,
see.
we will see. We'll see
Mhm.
what happens.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Okay. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up? Hit them all?
I do love that they brought Jewish lightning back and how everybody was telling Fact that we don't say that. And so I think that that was another really fun nod to earlier in the season when I think it was Richie who was yelling that the first time. And now Richie has grown. And so he's able to tell
He is
Fact not to say
grown.
that and professionally say, hey, excuse me while I go deal with this problematic person. Uh, so I love those nods to earlier moments in the season. So
Yes.
good.
So good. All those little details that they like some of these little details just almost have their own narrative arcs. It's so fun. Okay. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 8, The Bear Season 2. You can find it available on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you hung out with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 2. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating or review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 8. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon with the penultimate episode of season 2. So we hope you have an amazing weekend. We'll talk again very soon.